Thank you everybody for coming. I know it's the end of the day, so, thank you for being troopers and kind of joining us. Hopefully this will be, as entertaining as a panel can be. But I was thinking to kind of set the stage, would you each mind doing an introduction and kind of talking a bit about your company, kind of why you're here today, and just your profile in general. So.
Yeah, I'll kick off. I'm Lewis. I am the founder of Emergence, which is a media communications advisory firm. We advise, we don't publish, but we advise a range of companies on working with the media, policy and regulation, and brand reputation. Prior to that, I spent 5 years working in the gambling industry, and was also an advisor in the UK Parliament.
That's great. Hi, my name is Gockley. I am a director at FunPlus Ventures, which is the corporate venture arm of FunPlus. FunPlus is actually a large developer and publisher of mobile games. It's a kind of a hybrid Chinese-American company. I've been in games for the last 8 years, a variety of roles from M&A to corporate development to now investing.
Hi, my name is David. I run the European office for Gamevil and Come To Us, Korean publishers, mobile games publishers. Our top game is called Summoner's War. It's a top 5 grossing title in Germany, France, many other countries. That's it.
Hi, I'm Fraser MacInnes. I'm Director of Business Development for Gockley. We are a multinational developer-publisher focused on mobile free-to-play games. We have offices in LA, Barcelona, Dublin, Tokyo, just opened a London office, just opened a Boulder, Colorado office. And yeah, some of our big games are Looney Tunes and Star Trek Fleet Command and the DICE franchise. So yeah, that's it.
Hi everyone, I'm Miley Chen. I'm working for Tencent. I'm doing strategy at the publishing end, and Tenzin is so we know the Chinese market better, and we actually start to do export and publish games in the global market. So happy to here today to share, from the point of view of a Chinese company, how we see the China and then global publishing. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks guys. I think it's really interesting that we have kind of 3 of the publishers today with kind of based in Asia, it's a good perspective on global. It'll be interesting to see how kind of from the West things have moved to the East, but also vice versa, what you're doing in the Western market and how you're planning to conquer that. Especially since I think you're all, Gockley is somewhat more casual, but I guess you're all very focused on core games a lot. So I think it'll be interesting to talk about how that has changed. So I'm going to get started. My first question is, it's now more competitive than ever to stay at the top of the App Store and to get those organic installs. So right now, that traffic is getting, there's more competition for traffic than ever. How are you staying competitive? And do you find that it's still worth having your game at the top of the App Store, or have you found another strategy to remain competitive? So could we hear from Fraser first?
Sure. So I have to correct you there. We are very well represented with some casual games in our portfolio, but some of the biggest and fastest growing games in our portfolio are actually from other genres. So we're very well represented in RPG and also MMORTS. Star Trek Fleet Command is a game that it's been out for just over a year, and the game is doing anywhere between 17 and 20 million a month right now. So I would say that when it and I think one of Gockley's big things is that we're about a diverse array of genres. So we've had, I think, 6 consecutive games that are kind of 100 million lifetime games in 6 different genres to date. And the way we've done that, and the way we've managed to remain competitive is by investing literally every year tens of millions into our publishing infrastructure. So that feels like kind of the base level entry requirement these days. And when I speak to young studios and they're thinking about hiring a UA guy, my heart kind of sinks, because the market is now so toxically competitive that without a sort of weapons grade infrastructure behind you, there isn't really a way of being truly competitive. But to answer the question more broadly, I think that it's not just about having an amazing ability to kind of drive down CPI and to be able to acquire users and have the highest organic uplift possible. You really have to have game experiences that resonate with people. That, you know, those game experiences, you can have, you know, the best infrastructure in the world, but unless you're pairing the right experience with the right audience, you're not really going to get anywhere. And for us, we've always kind of been very, you know, diligent about picking a market segment, deciding that we're going to go after that, whatever it takes, and then spending the very significant resources to get there. So we don't prospect on the market with, okay, we'll build something in 3 months. If it doesn't show any signs of traction, we'll kill it. We're like, that's not our model at all. We think the competitive advantage in terms of competing at the highest level of this market is you have to work with the best teams in the business because they build the best games. So have fewer teams that you work with, but build better products.
Thank you. So would you say that outspending is a strategy?
Sorry?
Outspending somebody is a strategy. Like, you will just, at some point, it will be about volume.
The market absolutely validates that approach. I wouldn't say that it's always that it's necessarily Scopely's approach. If it's about direct spend on UA, certainly, like, you can see companies have had a very effective strategy of kind of choking all of the inventory out of the marketplace for other games. So that is a strategy. It's interesting when you look at the kind of, in the fullness of time, the life cycle for games that have pursued that strategy. When they turn off UA, those games tend to kind of dwindle pretty quickly. So we're much more interested in building games that have kind of got a more retentive core and have kind of more intrinsic value. It has to be a balance between these things.
Thank you. And David, would you like to kind of take the original question as well? How do you stay competitive?
Sure. So I think our challenge is to stay at the top grossing charts, which I think is definitely a position where you want to be in, no question. Our game is 6 years old this year. And what we've been doing for the past 3 years is really focus on the community, recognize our players, have very strong connection to these players, have a lot of offline events for these people all across the world. We established the Summoners War World Arena Championship Series as a series of offline events in Japan, US, Korea. We had the last World Final in Paris last year with over 240,000 peak concurrent viewers. So we're really trying to make these, create this content for our players to consume, stay informed about the game, learn aspects of the game that they didn't know before because it's a very complex title, and just keep people engaged is very, very important for us.
So you're going with a content approach, and has your UA strategies changed, or is it more just like targeting, very focused, again, like in that way?
Yeah, well, different situation for different titles. So Summoners War is a game where we have to sustain. So we are both looking for new users and trying to retain people that we have and trying to get people back that have lapsed. So of course we, keep trying and keep spending. We keep experimenting with influencer marketing, which is very, very tricky and difficult. And then for new games that we're launching, the strategy is a little different. So we launched a game called Skylanders Ring of Heroes early last year. We went to the top 1 RPG charts all across Europe and in the US. Unfortunately, that game had problems of its own. So unless your game is really, really strong, the marketing can't fix it. So in that sense, I would agree with you. You have to have the top product first.
And Miley, obviously, Tencent has many, many titles, many games. Some of the largest, kind of most successful titles of the past few years the company has invested in. What would you say is different about what Tencent does compared to the other approaches that we've heard?
Well, I would say so. One of the differentiations that Tencent is really like China is our strongest market, and compared to the Western market, well, we're still just a new baby. So for China, we still have our Honors of King as the top 1 grossing has been launched 4 or 5 years ago and still keeping number 1. So we know how to maintain the game and build the game into an IP in the long term. And then Tencent, it's different, not just a game company, but Tencent has its own ecosystem in China. Like, for example, we have 1.1 billion user base from our WeChat, QQ, our non-game applications. We have our own payments. We have our own cloud. So it's more like the ecosystem. And for us, is that how to use our ecosystem to build a better community for gaming, and how to use like the technology, like the user data, to attract the suitable users to our games, just big like audience network, like from Facebook. And the second thing is that, we know that we're no Chinese market. We know the free-to-play mechanics. We know monetization. We have our own engine. And how to replicate the success to the market outside China is now the next thing we're going to learning. And while I would say that from a Chinese company to do the West is completely different markets, so we have a lot to learn from other companies.
Yeah, it's very different for sure. And Graham, you also invest, right? And I wanted to start to ask you a bit about the talent. There's obviously the part that you do in terms of promoting the game, doing the marketing, but also the quality of the game and the team you work with matters a lot. So where are you looking for talent right now to invest in?
Yeah, I think Francis spoke to this a bit. Like, talent is the biggest thing. There's a lot of talented people at this conference. There's a lot of talented developers all around the world, and that's becoming even more so as markets like Southeast Asia and India emerge and become even larger. So we're pretty agnostic as to where the talent itself is located. We believe that a great team can build a game anywhere. Where that kind of hits the road is kind of the publishing. So as Francis also alluded to, you can't just kind of plug a UA resource into a team and expect a game to grow successfully. There's a lot of inherent specialization around those types of roles now, and building also community around games that ensure that these games last for 10 plus years. We're seeing the top mobile titles live that long, and therefore when you're really building for these types of games, you need to think about that long of a timeline. So where we invest, we look mostly in North America and Europe, just because we see the Western market as continuing to grow, and we understand that. Obviously, companies like Tencent know the Chinese market very well. We're top 10 publisher there, but obviously nowhere near Tencent's size and scale, nor do we have their platform advantages. But we think that there are probably 4 markets right now that are capable of producing $1 billion game. That's the West, China, Japan, and South Korea. But we think over the next 2 to 4 years, also India and Southeast Asia by themselves are capable of producing games that can produce $1 billion per year, which is a pretty staggering amount. I know that probably sounds pretty crazy, but that's very kind of doable in those markets, especially as monetization increases as those gaming populations all, have access to the technology.
Do you invest in a team where you see a potential crossover for a game is like, this game is doing well, but the real potential for this game is I can take this game to Japan, I can take this game to China, I can take this game to Korea. Do you have those kinds of investments, or is it more, if it'll work, I believe it'll work globally and I'm going to have a global strategy?
Yeah, they're fairly distinct markets. So I think the best teams are the ones that can localize the game to a very specific extent. So I don't think it's easy as like turning on a switch and just turning on the game and shipping it in India and assuming that it scales well. You can see teams like the PUBG team do a lot of work to make sure a game like that scales in India, or like Free Fire in Brazil is very heavily customized towards that audience, including the monetization schemes that they use are very different than the monetization schemes they use for the Western countries. So it's not as easy as a one-to-one transfer, but I think there are opportunities to do that. It just takes a team that understands that audience and that market very well.
Great, thank you. And Louis, I wanted to ask you, because I know you have some insight about the Middle East, and it's a market that we don't talk about as much as about, let's say, like China or North America. I wanted to ask, what trends do you see developing over there in terms of publishing? Do you see people looking for a certain kind of talent or a certain kind of game, certain genres that might work?
Yeah, no, good question. So we have worked with a number of firms in the Middle East. I think I would probably agree that the Middle East as a region has probably been slightly overlooked, particularly by Western developers, but I think it's generally accepted as a region that it does hold a lot of potential over the coming years. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, it currently has an 80% mobile penetration rate, so that's about 7.5 million people with smartphones. So that is significant, but also if you look at the kind of rapid advancement of technology that is bringing mobile gaming to the masses and is bringing in new players, I mean, 5G is going to be a significant driver in some of these emerging markets. I think it's said that by 2024, 34% of people will be, or 34% of traffic will be on the 5G network. So, and actually, if you look at the Middle East, in some regions, 5G is already deployed. So I think there's a real opportunity there. And also, I think one of the reasons for some of the success that you've seen already in the Middle East is down to the success of popular titles, but also the ability to, as we already alluded to, the ability to localize content in those regions. So actually being able to localize games and content in terms of local language, in Arabic, but also in terms of content. So even localizing things like skins that can represent, local outfits and local colors even can be a significant driver as well.
Okay, thank you. That's quite interesting. I wanted to ask a bit more on the talent pipeline. I think multiple people are going to take this question. How much of your pipeline, and I think we can go from like Miley down the line, is existing companies that you've worked with, existing developers, versus finding new titles? I know it's probably hard to find, like the exact number, but what would you say is existing versus new talent, and is that going to change?
Well, for Tencent, I think that we're doing both. So it depends. So I think, so for working with existing developers or partners, or even in-house team of third-party studios, we actually we have been doing that for many years. And the reason why is that, so we believe that a top-grossing game is not built one day. So we believe that only those developers or studios, they have experience that they developing as one genre for many years, and then those experience they could apply to their new project. And then we're also actually aggressively looking for new talents because we're expanding our business. Like for example, while we have a new in-house development studio who are making independent games. So actually we have some indies from China or from the Western world to join Tencent. We're expanding global publishing, so we need talents who know user acquisition, who know Middle East market or Europe, United States. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Fraser.
So I don't think there's a straightforward answer to this. I think when it comes to Gockley, we are quite obsessed with studio focus. And we're trying to build games that take quite a lot of time and money to build in the first place. And we expect those games to have a 5+ year life cycle. Otherwise, it feels like we've failed, which sounds almost grotesque to say, but it is the market.
No pressure.
Yeah, right. It is the market that we're in. So the way in which we approach this is, there are, of course, downstream opportunities. If you found a brilliant team that can deliver a 100 million a year game, then you don't want them to only ever deliver one game. I understand that. But at the same time, it's very easy to compromise the game that you're building by diluting that team's focus on what they're doing. When it comes to new teams, we're always looking for new teams. We're always looking for our next big franchise partner. Our key focus in general isn't on games, it's on teams that can build great games. And I'd probably be killed or skinned alive for if one of our PR people heard me saying that our focus isn't games. Of course it's games, but teams make great games. And I think that the big challenge in the market right now that I see and that I experience on the business development side is that there are a lot of great teams out there, but the vast majority of them still kind of fall short of what is required to build and run a Scopely-sized product. So there are very few off-the-rack studios that are available, because if they're already delivering at the kind of level that we need them to deliver at, they probably don't need or want a big partner. They're probably doing fine on their own. So what we tend to focus on right now are, where are the highly competent, the high pedigree founders that are, maybe quite a small group of people that are in a highly scalable location and that have the same level of ambition and focus, and preferably some kind of specific genre focus as well. that Scopely can build a team around, and I think that's going to be our bread and butter for the next decade. I don't see that changing. Even, no matter how many times we find great teams, our model's always going to be to try and build a consolidation path and to make that team a first-party team and to build the best stable of first-party free-to-play games developers in the world. And you don't do that by resting on your laurels and waiting for a team that's busy in live ops to be available to build the next game. You do that by sending people like me out on the road constantly to go and find new people.
Find that talent. Yeah, amazing. David?
So we do a lot of in-house development in Korea. We have a lot of different teams, both on Gamevil and Come to Us side, making our own titles. But we're also stepping up our business development and trying to sign external developers. We just acquired 2 studios in Korea. One is called Day 7. They do these kind of choices, story-driven games. Another studio is doing an idle game called Dragon Sky. These are both younger teams. In the West, we're very open to what kind of team we're working with, but as Fraser said, it's not that easy to find. We're currently working with the developers of Project Cars to make a mobile version of this game, so British company. We'll be publishing Project Cars Go hopefully this year. Aside from that, we're looking and very open to junior teams, more senior teams, but you probably end up with people that have a bit more experience to make the kind of game that we want.
So it sounds like there's a common theme in finding a team with good pedigree or a good game, but that you can also plug into a system and it would scale, right? It's not just a matter of either the talent or even the game, but can our infrastructure or the systems that we put behind this really take this to the next level? It would be interesting. Again, Graham, you invest, so I'm guessing you look more towards new teams, but it would be good to get some background on how exactly that works with the rest of FunPlus. And
yeah. So the couple thoughts there. The first one is that yes, there are the teams that work best when they do have a publisher, or as we're saying, some sort of marketing engine connected to them that helps them scale. And that's where teams like Scopely are world class in developing that sort of experience for developers and the opportunity to scale a game and also give access to great licenses out there and really help with all of that type of business development stuff that a smaller developer might not have experience doing, and that's a fantastic place in the market for you to seek out publishers and support like that. FunPlus is a little bit different, probably on the other end of the spectrum in terms of the support that we usually give our investments. We usually don't assist much with publishing. We trust them to make the best decisions when it comes to how they choose to publish their games, and that could be self-publishing, that could be choosing a publisher. Our usual thesis now is that you want to be as close to your audience and your community as possible. You just get so much more learning from how to interact with them, how to engage them, how to retain them, how to monetize them by actually publishing the game that you're yourself, or by developing the community and figuring out other ways to again engage and work with them. So when we talk through it with our portfolio teams, usually we have a conversation around that. What type of relationship do you want to develop with your audience, and how is that going to create value for the company going forward? And that's where we start the discussion. FunPlus itself kind of started as a startup itself, so that's where that DNA comes from. We really like to talk to entrepreneurs that would dig into the game development process and really dig into what this audience wants and deliver on that experience. So again, we're on the other end of the spectrum, but there isn't necessarily one right answer for every type of developer out there.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Louis, I have a special version of this question for you. I assume you see kind of game teams sometimes break away from a large studio, maybe want to launch something on their own. When is that point where you would advise a team either, okay, this title is great, but you need more resources, go find yourself a publisher, or really stick it out and go on your own? Do you see companies at that inflection point, and what would you say is the difference between advising one versus advising the other?
Yeah, it's a mixture. So I think it depends ultimately on the need of each company. So it tends to be done on a case-by-case basis, and I think it would depend on ultimately scale, what they're looking to achieve, and also if you're looking at individual teams as well. So we talked already about monetization. So one of the things we are seeing now is actually more alignment between user acquisition and ad monetization teams. So some studios are actually merging those teams because they view them as very aligned disciplines. So I think it depends largely on each company, but I think the other thing as well, just to come back to your point about the talent pipeline. So, I mean, in the UK at least, I think it's no secret that we have been focusing on the issue of a potential shortfall in skills for creative industries for quite some time. And often I think what you're seeing is some companies, especially in the UK, looking elsewhere for that sort of talent. But also I think there are some certain things on the horizon that present additional challenges when it comes to talent and skills. So, I mean, Brexit is a significant one, and I know that when we speak to companies, they are concerned around whether that would exacerbate existing concerns around skills. Over a third of gaming positions come from the European Union, so I think that does present an issue. The other one, which is just a personal one of mine, is that I think on the issue of diversity, perhaps the mobile gaming industry has some way to go in terms of representation. You know, over half of mobile gamers are women, but that is not represented in the workforce. In the UK, at least, it's only around 14% of women in the workforce. And when you then turn it to look at BAME and ethnic minorities as well, it falls to around 4%. So I think there's a challenge there as well in terms of when you're looking at the teams and the skills that you want to attract, when you don't see yourself represented or underrepresented in these industries, I think you are less likely to put yourself forward and apply for those sort of positions as well.
And I mean, I think that is also a bigger topic, like the topic of diversity and introducing that, especially now in Britain and with talent. But would you say that there are high potential markets for talent? And I'll give you an example. Like we work a lot with casual games, but we've seen like the Turkey market just go through the roof in terms of like studios, indies coming up in that market. Do you see other markets like that maybe companies should go to right now to ensure that they have a foothold in these areas?
That might be one for you guys, perhaps.
I mean, I think you can give an answer and then we can go. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Like,
okay, sure.
You started it. You know?
No. Yeah, it's my fault. Again, I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think if you're looking at emerging markets in terms of growth, so I mean, historically it's been Asia Pacific and North America, some of the key markets in terms of market share, and also, you know, the sort of things that we're seeing coming out of there. But I think there is a shift in terms of where people are looking for that sort of talent. I know we talked about the Middle East. I mean, in terms of growth, that's expected to grow by about 27% by 2026. So I think in terms of looking to attract those skills from elsewhere, emerging markets will be key. Yeah,
because there's a difference in where the money is coming from and where the actual developers are coming from, right? And I think, especially in the past 2 years, China has grown a lot as, you know, a tier 1 market that is as strong as the US right now. And it'll be interesting to know what you guys think what is the next China? Is it India? Is it, you know, South America? Like, what is the next super high growth territory? Probably not develop exactly at the same pace as China did, which was quite impressive, but where do you think things are going next? Miley, do you want to?
Well, for us, for Tencent, China is our hometown, and then, you know, like actually the Western market is new market for us because we actually just started to do the global publishing 2 years ago. So and then the second is the Japanese market, because before Japanese is very a closed market that, you know, only Japanese game can do well in Japan. But surprisingly, actually, that recent years that there is lots of Chinese games doing very well in Japan, and though that the population in Japan is very small, but those big whale players, they really spend a good money on that, and then the players, they're all Asian, so a bit more similar in China. So I think that Western and Japan are really the biggest market for us to take a look in the next 4 to 5 years for us.
Sure, thank you. And Graham, I think you kind of wanted to say something earlier, and I wanted to give you the chance to answer that question, see if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I mean, I already spoke a bit about our views on Southeast Asia and India, just as that's where emerging markets that are capable of creating kind of a hit game in and of themselves. Back to your point around where development talent is, I think that's very democratized, and that's in a lot of places. And you'll see investment dollars also kind of pour towards an arbitrage of lower cost places. That's one of the reasons Turkey is looking so well in Eastern Europe in general. If development there, if your development dollar can go further in those markets, you're more willing to kind of spend in those markets as opposed to more developed places like North America, especially California gets very expensive. The same dollar can go 8 times farther in a market like India or Turkey. And the other edge of that is we're seeing a lot of success with hybrid teams. So you have a small team in one location, but a larger development kind of back office in another location. We're seeing a lot of Israeli, Eastern European teams. They're really highly capable in leveraging that to a great extent. I think we're going to see that more over time as distributed teams, or however you want to say it, hybrid teams take advantage of those talent markets over time.
Okay. How much time do we have left? Oh, sorry. Okay, I guess we're almost done. Just one thing. Is there anything that, out of today, what each of you would like everybody to remember? Like, if they could be left with one thing, what would you like it to be? We can, again, do like the whole thing. If you want to start?
Maybe first. I think the next big thing for publishing, it would be the new way of that, how publisher get more involved in a more early stage and more value that the publisher can bring on board. And then I think the one most interesting thing from my personally work is that, how to combine the expertise of Chinese companies that either in terms of free-to-play, multiplayer, and combine with the creation from the Western companies, and then to make something really big and, suitable for the global audience.
Great, thank you, Fraser.
I would echo some of that. I think for a long time now in the free-to-play mobile market, the lines for big successful publishers, for a lot of them, and certainly Scopely, the lines between the kind of developer division of labor versus the publisher division of labor has become sort of irrevocably blurred, and needs to be that way for people to run successful businesses. And that requires a lot of patience, I think, on the developer side, because there's a sort of intuitive understanding that all things concerning development and design happen with the developer. But a developer's view on the market at any given time, in terms of the data that they can read and interpret, is maybe 1 or 2 products wide, whereas a publisher has got very many more products, much more vast resources. A lot of the people that work in these companies, Scopely wouldn't even call itself an exclusive publisher anymore. We're as much a developer as we are a publisher. So I think the kind of key thing is, that I would love people to understand, is that in my mind, it's much better for a publisher to say no to 100 teams that aren't the right fit for a game than it is for them to take a chance on teams and kill a project after 3 months. I think the burden of validation should be moved further up the funnel, so that it's not just about validating the product early. That's important, but I think it's much better to invest a lot of time and effort in validating the team and creating a really legitimate and realistic path to scaling a world-class team, because making games is messy, things are going to go wrong, the market's going to be unpredictable, and you need a great team to be able to navigate those things. So I think there's a lot of false negatives in this business where games get cancelled needlessly because we're just so focused on, oh, that product doesn't work, let's cancel it and move on to the next thing.
So I think the one takeaway would be it's better to publish fewer games but make them higher quality.
It's not even so much about your frequency of output. I wouldn't want to kind of, I want to get out of the forecasting businesses.
And I don't think we have time. I don't mean,
Sure.
but I think we need.
But it's about teams.
Patty's gonna come here and slap me.
You're already invading the next session by like 7 minutes.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, David, go quickly.
So I agree. And I would add that if you want a game that lasts very long, you need to find a way to engage with your audience, talk to your players, and take their feedback back to your developers and make the developers listen, change, and talk back to your players. I think that's very important and very tricky to get right.
Yeah, and ditto. I think this is never, and it's never been a better time to be a games founder. I just want to like echo that. I think a lot of people are kind of not as bullish as they are as they have been on the mobile market. Mobile market is still growing at double digits per year. It's still doing great. There's a lot of opportunities for PC now with different platform shifts and different ways that people are building community and 5G and streaming and cloud. Like there's incredible opportunities out there. So I want people to be a little bit more optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I mean, briefly, I think the main challenge for me is with my media hat on, is the challenge for trying to monetize games and content through, in-app purchases, microtransactions, etc., without straying over the line into incurring the wrath of regulators and media in the UK and elsewhere.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much. You've been absolutely amazing. I wish I could talk to you more, but